Welcome to From the White Pill Box, the podcast where we stomp on statism and find the white pills along the road to a stateless society. I'm your host, Mark Maresca. I'm the author of the Substack articles of the same name, From the White Pill Box, content specifically for the already red-pilled, libertarians, voluntarists, anarchists, people who've overcome the myth of statism or are close to it. It's easy for us to be black-pilled, to believe evil will win. That's where the white pill box comes in. There are real-world reasons to have hope. Let's get going. Greetings, all. Thank you so much for listening today. This episode will be part 18 of my series on the myth of authority. We've recently been discussing how things will look in the coming decades along the transition to a free society. We cover the reasons why we should expect the myth of authority to continue eroding, and even faster than it has so far. We focused on trends we are already seeing in the majority of people, plus their psychology regarding the state. Put simply, as the myth of authority loses strength, people's behaviors shift accordingly to reflect it. And that shift in behavior alters the environment, specifically the environment in which the people in government have to exist, the people I refer to as the bullies of the state. For them, being a bully is less attractive an option in this changing environment, so their life calculations change accordingly. We covered all these factors in previous episodes, so to get the full picture, I'd encourage you to review the series, which I've linked to. Today, we'll continue discussing the upcoming decades and focus on the environment the bullies are forced to deal with. Right up front, I'm going to give you the major takeaways for today, some real white pills. First, the environment that the state, meaning the state bullies, have to operate in will tangibly change, enough to noticeably change their behavior. We'll see today's trends only accelerated, to the point where libertarians won't be debating anymore whether we really are in the transition. Next white pill, which is really just an outcome of the first one. The transition will be characterized by none other than bullies themselves backing off. Now, to be clear, I am not suggesting we all will live in a free society a few decades from now. No, I am saying that the transition is underway and that it will indeed become broadly noticeable a decade or so from now. Most particularly noticeable in how the bullies have to respond to the ongoing collapse of the myth of authority. Now, most libertarians, if they haven't listened to this series yet, and instead are just starting with today's, would probably be skeptical about these white pills. Fair enough, but if I've got your attention, hopefully you'll listen with interest. Now, before we dive in, I want to cover a few points. I do feel this analysis is realistic, reasonable, and plausible, and the previous episodes explain why. But I fully acknowledge that the future is uncertain, so I want to mention 3 assumptions I'm making about the future decades. One assumption, that the state doesn't derail the transition with a crisis that goes too far, like a nuclear war or biological catastrophe. Since that is possible, it means we're in a race between the progress toward a free society and the state sending us back to the Stone Age. If the state wins that race, all bets are off. But if we make it through the next decades, the chances the state does that sort of broad damage will diminish quickly, and the race will have been won. So again, that's all up in the air for the time being. A second assumption, that the trends we're seeing will continue, that the psychology of the myth of authority, the psychology of its erosion, will continue to operate, that people will continue to be who they are fundamentally, that man's nature will not change. Last assumption, sure, the state will keep trying to scare us with more crises, but these will be harder to sell thanks to the internet and decentralized media. I'll take a few minutes to flesh this out. Let's contrast 2 recent major crises, 9/11 and COVID. 9/11 for sure set things backwards for freedom. After that, people went along pretty much with whatever government wanted. But that was before the internet matured. Information was still funneled through the state and major media. The state could easily sway everyone into blind obedience, like the Great Depression did, like Pearl Harbor did, etc. Then there was COVID, and again, the state was able to basically do as it pleased with little pushback from the population. But COVID happened when the internet was well established. Information was now very decentralized, so it didn't take decades. After a year or two, the COVID propaganda failed to work. The state backed off. Today, the state has largely lost its ability to use a crisis to sway the whole population. Some, yes, for sure, but not the whole of us. If you're not so sure about that, look at every supposed crisis since 9/11. Ask yourself if the public has been utterly mobilized since in the same way. Remember monkeypox and bird flu? Those post-COVID health scares? Did they work? Nope. Trying to scare us with catastrophic climate predictions. Do you see a powerful consensus on that? No. The killer bees. Whatever happened to them? Who remembers the asteroid near miss? Don't remember that? They keep trying to get us to hate each other over race. Not so much, sorry. Oh, remember the Chinese spy balloon? No. North Korean missile tests. They pull that one out once in a while to give it another spin. Nope. They tried to scare us with a China versus Taiwan crisis. Nope. The Russia-Ukraine war did not mobilize people. Okay, it started off with quite a lot of people joining in, but it never really caught on, and today it's gotten controversial. Same for the Israeli and Hamas conflict. How about the fascist takeover if Trump won? Both times. The January 6th U.S. Capitol riots, bringing down democracy. Nope. If there's a pretty common thread here, it's that these things don't last anymore. They often don't even get off the ground. Pre-internet, the government would have been able to leverage at least some of these, big time. Now, most of these peter out quickly, and zero of them mobilized the public into a single common response. Zero. Yes, you have support among various groups for some of these, but it seems to be getting out of their reach to get everyone in lockstep anymore. So I'm assuming these attempts to scare us and divide us will still be business as usual, but the state will have a hard time making them stick. So again, I'm analyzing the near future of the transition based on these assumptions, that the state won't end civilization, that human psychology will stay the same, and that government crises will be harder to sell. Now to the meat of it. In the last episode, we discussed how the people change as the myth erodes. People may be quietly indifferent, or express verbal dissatisfaction, or they may disregard the state or outright defy it. Sometimes they'll even be confrontational. All of these behaviors across the whole population is part of the bully's environment. So now we'll ask, how will the bullies experience the coming environment of a greater eroding myth of authority? How are they going to deal with this? To answer that, we need to split the bullies into their two main groups, the ones with the guns and the ones with the suits. The enforcers have the guns and can use them. They are trained and armed. The politicians, judges, prosecutors, etc., I call them the suits. The suits get to call out the enforcers when they please. Together, the two groups are the bullies of the state. And just in case you haven't heard my episode where I calculate their numbers, let me mention they are eye-opening. At most, there are just 3 million bullies in the United States. That's it. Armed enforcers, plus politicians, barely reaches 3 million. Yes, I know there are tens of millions more who hold state jobs. They don't count. I call them the clerks. They're not armed, and they can't call out the enforcers at will. They have no more power of the gun than you or me. No, it's just those 3 million bullies. Only that small set of people is pertinent to this analysis. The enforcers and the suits. They are the state. They are what's in the way along the transition to a free society. Well, each of the two groups has its own distinctive feel from the environment. Start with the enforcers. and take each behavior one by one. And for kicks, let's make you the enforcer so you get into their skin and feel this environment firsthand. Quiet indifference. That's more people seeing government as irrelevant and just hand-waving it away. You are noticing more people are indifferent to politicians, the people you are protecting. You work in an environment where more people don't give your bosses in suits the time of day. Your bosses, to them, are valueless. People avoid getting involved with your bosses, the politicians. In fact, they're avoiding you too. And when they do have to deal with them or you, it's because they're scared of what might happen, not because they feel obligated. And the people also seem to be getting wise that you don't protect them. You protect your bosses, the ones who make the rules that they're afraid to break. It's no secret, it's you they're scared of because you enforce their rules. You also notice they're not so much telling their kids to respect your bosses either. In fact, more and more they're telling their kids not to respect you, to avoid you. That's it. You're experiencing an environment of quiet indifference. Well, actually, no. That's only one aspect of your environment. You see, people are also expressing verbal dissatisfaction. They've gotten pretty outspoken about their mistrust of your bosses. Of course, they say they don't exactly trust you either. Partly it's not trusting you bullies to act fairly. They call the justice system a joke. They say your bosses make things up as they go. They think you enforce based on how you feel that day. But it's not only that. Some people are saying they don't even recognize your boss's authority or your authority. And you've seen it, along with your fellow enforcers. People outright complaining about you and your bosses, laughing at you, mocking you, screaming at you, cursing you guys out left and right. Yep, that's the environment of verbal dissatisfaction you have to endure. Oh, wait, that's not all. Your environment is harder still. People have even been quietly disregarding you bullies. Yep, a lot of them are literally not complying with your boss's rules. They're trying to get around them any chance they can, and it sucks because they figured out all these little ways to do it. You're in a tough spot when they break rules only a little. If you try to enforce the little offenses, your own managers may call you out for being petty or wasting department money on small things. But you also know if they get away with it, it emboldens them. It's frustrating, all right. Oh, wait, there's more. People are showing outright defiance. This shit is more than just annoying and frustrating. People out there are plain and simple refusing to comply. Some of them are getting confrontational. They're belligerent with you on the street or in city hall meetings or in courtrooms. You're hearing stories. You're seeing videos. It's getting crazy out there. Hell of an environment for an enforcer like yourself. And by the way, it's not much better if you're military. You still have to deal with more and more hate being thrown at you. Except you hear it from foreigners as much as domestically. People in other countries don't appreciate your armed forces in their countries. You're not at all popular over there. Plus, the job itself takes you away from your family. It's stressful. Not to mention, you could die thousands of miles from home. Okay, so whether you're police or military, how are you sizing all this up in your mind? You've reported your frustrations to your superiors. Nothing happens. And those superiors, by the way, have the same frustrations, see all the same things. They're seeing more and more of their on-the-ground enforcers reporting discontent with their jobs or quitting or transferring to safe desk jobs. These superiors report that up the line. So all along the way up, it's clear to everyone the environment is not so favorable. All the enforcers at all levels know it. They're all in this environment. They all, up and down the line, sense how enforcement is getting too difficult. And do you think managers are going to try to solve the problems on behalf of the state? No, they are like everyone else, focused on their immediate role to recruit or to manage their employees, which is all getting more and more difficult. The older enforcers might remember that things were not as bad 20, 30 years ago. But that's all it is, an observation. It's not like they'll be trying to fix it or can even conceive of how to fix it. It's nothing like you were expecting when you joined up. You're not feeling the job anymore. You joined up and you felt gung-ho. You were being righteous, defending the law, defending freedom. You chose a job as an enforcer feeling you were doing the right thing. Now, the environment doesn't make it feel so righteous. You've seen situations where you could have enforced the law, but you let it go. Look the other way. Maybe you're starting to feel indifferent, that it is a waste of time. Or maybe you really think it would be unfair to enforce some law or follow some order. Your own judgment is slipping its way into your thinking. And anyway, you really don't want to look like a bad guy. Your department is chronically short-staffed, plus they're always threatening more cutbacks. You get no help from the public at large, you get no help from your immediate bosses, and for sure no help from your politician bosses in the suits, who everyone seems to hate anyway. What's an enforcer to do? Double down and start cracking heads? Nope, that won't fly with HR. Stay on the job? Great. Just sit and take the indifference, the disregard, the ridicule, even the confrontations, possibly deadly? It's stress day in and day out. Your family and friends know it too, and they've told you they wish you'd find something less stressful to do. Heck, less dangerous. And you might just be thinking how that's not bad advice at all. Okay, let's get you out of the enforcer's head. In this environment, just how motivated is a young person to become a new enforcer, or for an existing enforcer to stay in that line of work? Whatever their motivation is, my major point is, a few decades from now, their motivation will be a heck of a lot less than today. So there's a nice white pill. Plain and simple, it'll be harder and harder to keep enforcement staff up. Also, harder to get enforcers to even enforce. If you think that's just theoretical, let me revisit some real-world examples. Let's take a short trip through the world of enforcers refusing to enforce. Recall the COVID experience, how the state did such a bad job of dealing with the actual virus along with the obvious bullying of everyone. All of it ended up undermining their legitimacy. But did you know there were examples during COVID of actual sheriffs who were refusing to enforce COVID mandates? No, not a majority of sheriffs, but enough. Enough to make it noticeable in the environment to the suits. Think of it. When the enforcers, especially the heads of departments like sheriffs, refuse to enforce in that environment, what's a politician to do? Well, the politicians have legal options to deal with that sort of disobedience. They can use the courts. They can ask the state police to step in, maybe even the National Guard. So why don't they? Because they can't be sure that if one set of enforcers refuses to enforce, what's to say it won't kick off a trend? That'd be super uncomfortable for the politician bullies, maybe even fatal. Much safer for them to stay quiet, pretend it never happened, move on to another topic, pay no attention to the disobedient sheriffs. That happened during COVID. How about another example on a grander scale? Let's look to the Soviet Union again. A huge reason those top bullies backed off was because the enforcers on the ground were refusing. I mean, it got so bad so quickly for them that the top bully himself, Gorbachev, did his own version of refusing to stop anti-Soviet sentiment. It's pretty dramatic, and I'll link to Michael Malice's book, The White Pill, if you want to read about the details. But there it is, a hard example in reality of what happens when the environment shifts enough. The bullies know their limits and respond accordingly. That situation was part of a cascade that ended with the Soviet Union house of cards falling. You see, the bullies up there had a good enough sense of their fate if they tried the harsh measures The consequences were feeling a bit too close to their own butts. Backing off quietly was safer. We can go on and on with examples of the state backing off. The United States started alcohol prohibition in 1920. That led to over a decade of organized crime and violence. Then in 1933, they ended prohibition. Why? Heck, all 1920 reasons for prohibition still existed in 1933. Alcohol still made people drunk. Truth is, it was simply not enforceable. Booze was still getting produced and distributed, people still drank, but the enforcers either didn't bother to enforce it or learn to profit themselves. Plus, the revenue agents were personally at risk. It was so obviously unenforceable that the state couldn't hide it, which risked undermining their legitimacy. Better to back off and forget the whole thing. Marijuana today is an example in progress. Federally, it's still illegal, but in many states, it's not, or much less illegal. Are the feds enforcing their laws? Not really. Are the states volunteering to enforce federal laws? Nope. Are feds asking the states to enforce them? Nope. Notice it's been like this for years and no one talks about it. Exactly. The bullies don't want their contradictions getting attention. So we can see there's plenty of examples from the past. Well, think to later on in the transition. It's no stretch to imagine that the bullies will find enforcement even tougher in that environment. Okay, now let's examine the suits, the politicians and other admins of the state, the bullies who have the enforcers at their beck and call. Let's see how they have to deal with each public behavior one by one. Okay, quiet indifference. You're the bullies that the public is really indifferent to. You're the supposed leaders, and they aren't giving you the time of day much anymore. They're not listening to the corporate media, who's all but dead anyway. So you're having a tough time even getting your message, propaganda, out there. Damn their indifference. They don't vote as much anymore. They're not involving themselves politically as much anymore. You've noticed your crowds are thinner. And for you lower-level bullies, fewer people even recognize you out there in public. It's not just frustrating from feeling impotent. It's starting to make you feel like you're not a good person. All those people out there utterly indifferent to you. Surely they must know you exist. Or do they? Are you that invisible? Not a good feeling. That lack of enthusiasm is making it dawn on you. The people out there are complying with your laws because they have to, not because they want to. It's starting to feel just a little bit like they may be right. You are a bully. They're keeping their kids out of public schools. That's not helping. You always knew that was a good way to get kids trained to respect you. Well, that's slipping away. Heck, they're teaching their kids not to respect you. And that's just the environment of quiet indifference you have to deal with. But wait, the people are showing verbal dissatisfaction. They're outright saying they don't trust you. They say you're selfish, greedy, unfair, petty, cruel. Worse still, they're suggesting you don't even have legitimate authority over them. Imagine people saying that out loud. They're laughing at you, mocking you, profanity thrown at you. And of course, that's not all. Your environment is harder still. People are not complying with your laws, circumventing your laws. That's outright defiance. Of course, you try to make sure the crowds you talk to are all supporters, but you've seen more videos than you care to say showing people getting confrontational with your fellow suits. It's getting crazy out there. You want your enforcers to crack down, but they're not doing it. They complain they're short-staffed, have bigger fish to fry. For all you know, they simply don't want to enforce your laws. Hell of an environment for a politician like yourself. How are you sizing all this up in your mind? The people don't trust you. They don't trust your enforcers. You're not even sure you can trust your enforcers. Some of them have even been disobedient. Even your staff are always complaining. You're wondering who you can trust. Oh, and your enforcers are thinning out. That's scary. They're the only thing standing between you and the mob. You feel helpless to fix things. What are you supposed to do? You were never an idea man. You always had people who did the thinking. not a comfortable environment. Maybe if you can get some cushy private sector job, it'll be less headache. You know a bunch of politicians who've left. Maybe. Okay, time to get out of the suit's head. Hopefully you got a good sense of his environment a decade or so from now. Ask yourself just how motivated a person will be to become a politician or to stay in that line of work. Same as the enforcers. Their motivation will be a heck of a lot less than today. Let's step back and think about what we've learned. I hope you can see why psychology is so important to this examination. Look at the environment the bullies got used to for thousands of years. It gave them a feeling of superiority over us, of pretending to be wise or special or powerful. But none of it's true. They're not actually courageous, brave, or heroic. It's all bluff and swagger, and we can still mostly see it today where they still enjoy such power. As things get dicier for them, they won't be getting brave. Bullies are not warriors or badasses. And that's a big reason the transition is likely to be peaceful. The bullies will back off the more they sense their butts are at risk. They're not movie heroes. Now, a key sign of a tipping point is when the state begins to fracture, how the response to the environment of one group undermines another state group. I imagine the clearest example of the state fracturing will be between the enforcers and the suits. Let me explain the psychology of this so you can see that it's more likely to happen than not, how they just might help disempower each other. Recall how the enforcers will be feeling. More discouragement, frustration, even fear, which all leads to a continuous thinning of their ranks. Well, guess what? The other bullies, the suits, the politicians, this enforcer problem is also part of their environment. They are aware this dynamic is happening to their enforcers. The enforcers are their tools, the group they need most immediately. If their tools become unreliable, weakened, discouraged, that's not at all pleasant for the politicians. They won't like the feel of that environmental factor at all. Let's put it simply. When you're a weak person and your protector starts to cut and run, you learn to cut and run yourself as early in that process as you can. But that dynamic also works in reverse. Look at it as an enforcer would. Think of how your bosses, the politicians, will gradually look more desperate and weak, look even more disconnected from regular people. And face it, you as an enforcer, you identify yourself as more of a regular person than as a suit. Imagine seeing your boss politicians brought down to earth. You're more and more having to realize these scared rats are the ones you are putting your life on the line for. That's killer for the motivation to stay in that line of work. I love that white pill dynamic there. It's not just the public's collapsing view of their legitimacy. It also compounds between the enforcers and the suits. They are wrecking each other's environments, wrecking their motivation to keep being bullies. Now, that's the fracturing of the main statist groups, enforcers and suits. But I would imagine we'll see fracturing at a more granular level. The major media will more likely stab politicians in the back, not from principle, but from desperation for ratings. And the politicians will return the favor. They always need someone to blame, and the more the major media is shunned by the public, the more they'll be a ready target of politicians. Academia will stab politicians in the back, probably for cutting off funding, and vice versa. Politicians will blame academia for whatever, as long as it distracts from their own blame. And all the other combos, academia stabbing the corporate media in the back, and vice versa. Throw the banking institutions in the mix. You get the picture. As they all weaken during the transition, they all get desperate. They eat each other. The assisted suicide of statism. Now, all this paints a grim picture for the state, so I want to revisit the expected counter-argument. Whenever the topic comes up of the state losing its grip, the natural response is to assume the state will find a way to battle the threat. Problem is, The true threat is the myth of authority eroding. But to the individual bully, it doesn't present itself that way. Yes, they personally wield power, like a state governor or a police officer, but always remember, however it is they act out their desperation, these actions will be uncoordinated from the transition's perspective. The myth of authority will not be their focus. The bullies won't be consciously defending the foundation of their power, the myth itself. They'll at best be defending the interests of their own scope of state power. So yes, those actions can and probably will cause harm, but it won't attack the root. The state, meaning its bullies, the state is not performing scientific observations in search of a downtrend in the myth of authority. That's absurd. It's too abstract of a root cause. It takes too much time and thinking to understand the root of statism. Think about it. You yourself, as a libertarian or anarchist, have rarely heard the myth discussed. Libertarian strategy for half-century has disregarded the myth, to right now even, and presumably for the foreseeable future. Almost no one in this movement is focusing on it. So if we, in this movement, haven't figured it out, why would it be plausible anyone in the state will? And even anyone who does has no one to fight. Bottom line, the state will be in trouble in a decade or so. And in terms of effectively combating this, they are basically powerless. Another nice white pill. So that's the environment of the bullies a decade or so from now. I hope it's clear that the simple psychology of that environment, it becoming increasingly inhospitable, all shows why the bullies will be backing off. If you are still unsure, bring it down once again to the individual level. Notice that any given bully can be anything. A psychopath, a narcissist, or simply self-absorbed, or selfish, or hell, even well-meaning. Doesn't matter, because they are all humans. And one thing pretty common among humans is we sense when we are not in a hospitable environment. In fact, it's arguable that the psychopaths and narcissists are better than most at sensing trouble. Good. For the transition to proceed, and hopefully as peacefully as possible, we should hope that humans remain exactly the way they are. We want a bully of the state to sense the even less hospitable environments to come. We want him to react according to human nature. We want him to feel less certain about a career as an armed officer, as armed military, as a politician. We want his subconscious to do exactly and precisely what all our minds do in the face of choices. Weigh the options, steer clear of the nasty options, gravitate toward the relatively better options. Because of those very normal human calculations, we want the people who are bullies to be motivated out of the bully line of work. We want the bullies who aren't bullies yet to steer clear of becoming bullies. I've given examples of this happening even today, of the state getting desperate and of potential bullies not even wanting to be bullies. In the coming decades, this will only be more pronounced. It takes little imagination to see that once that avalanche starts, there's no stopping it. So I think the actions of the bullies a decade or so from now will mostly be characterized by the thinning of their ranks. And if I had to guess, I'd say it would be most evident among the enforcers, since they will feel the environment most viscerally. Now, there are far fewer politicians than enforcers, so I would also guess politicians will be more easily replaceable. There's never a shortage, it seems, of people quite willing to boss others around from behind a safe wall of enforcers. Plenty of people short-sighted enough to pursue politics, even though its environment gets increasingly unpleasant. But no matter, the fine details of the bully's response to their environment are unpredictable. What is more reliable is the very human response of backing off when you even start to realize you are standing on cracking glass. and I'll wrap things up for today on that satisfying image. Now, it's worth speculating about the later stages of the transition, once we're at the point where people can see for themselves that statism is beyond recovery. We'll go down that road next time, and I'll share my thoughts about possible timelines. But until then, take care, and see you next time. Many thanks to Substack for hosting my podcast and my articles. And thanks especially to you for listening. And remember, keep looking for those white pills.